You Are the Healer is sponsored by BetterHelp. Therapy is mandatory because there's absolutely nothing wrong with seeking help. I think every person who walks this earth needs therapy, honestly. I'm stoked to be connected with BetterHelp to offer affordable and accessible therapy resources. The link is in my show notes, and you can also go to betterhelp.com/healer. That's better, HELP.com/healer. Now let's get into this episode.
Hello, and welcome back to You Are the Healer. This is the mental health education and motivation podcast by me, Sydney Rinderknecht, where I use my experience in my career as a psych nurse, as well as a human being with her own mental health experiences, to help you learn how to become your own healer. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for supporting the podcast. And this episode, we are going to be talking about anger. Okay, we're going to be defining what is anger. Why do we have it from like an evolutionary standpoint? Why did we develop anger? Why do you care to learn about anger? Common triggers for what makes us angry, how anger shows up in our body, and how we have emotional behaviors when we're angry and what happens when anger starts to consume us. And then we're going to talk about how to cope with anger in a healthy way and how change can come from channeling our anger and alchemizing it. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so grateful that you're here. We are in this season of spice, and I think anger is a perfect metaphor for the season of spice because sometimes anger can consume us, and sometimes anger is so painfully spicy and uncomfortable. Anger feels so uncomfortable in our bodies, and we can use anger to alchemize our lives and to turn it into something that is powerful, to create change. So we can either become basically overrun by the heat, or we can learn how to use the heat to our own advantage. So let's start by defining what is anger. So anger is a core human emotion. I always like to say with your emotions, like nobody's immune. There's a very, very, very small percentage of the population that are sociopaths and do not feel emotion. Most of the time, it is a guarantee in the human experience that you will feel all of the emotions. That's like the agreement that you make when you decide to become a human. So anger is a core emotion. It is a natural instinctive response to a perceived threat, injustice, violation, or frustration. So it is a naturally occurring emotion. And from an evolutionary standpoint, it serves a purpose. So why do we have anger? Why do we have emotions? Really, I mean, every emotion gives us information about our lives. And what anger can tell us is it can help us be protective. So anger can help us set boundaries and defend ourselves. If we feel like we've been violated, if we're in an unsafe situation, if we've been disrespected or unheard, then we can use anger to protect ourselves. Anger also serves the purpose of being activating. Think of a time that you were super, super angry and think about how you felt in your body when you were angry. It brings the sense of urgency. It gives you a lot of energy and like restlessness so that you can act, right? So if you're dealing with like an injustice, then anger motivates you and fuels up your body so that you can act on it and you can make a change from it. Anger is also informative. Anger cues us into what we value, right? So if you are really, really upset about something, it can be because you care a lot about it, and the anger is showing you that you really value something. Anger can point us to our unmet needs. It can point us to our broken boundaries. So when you feel really angry and upset that a boundary has been violated, the anger cues you in on that information. And anger can also be informative of pain. Anytime that there's pain in our lives, sometimes we feel really angry because of it. And another reason we have anger is because it's really rooted in care. Anger shows us that we care deeply about something. Otherwise, we wouldn't feel this really strong emotion because of it. So because we are getting so activated and upset and angry, that cues us in on, okay, I really value this. I really care about this thing. And now I hear a lot of the times that anger is a secondary emotion. And I have mixed emotions on this, but sometimes our anger is kind of like the tip of the iceberg, and there's another emotion underneath it. And the reason why it's a secondary emotion is because there's usually something bigger underneath the surface. And now sometimes I think you can be angry just to be angry, right? You can be disrespected and that just makes you angry. But a lot of times anger is a more easily accessible emotion. So in our society, some of us are taught it's more acceptable to be angry than to be sad, or it's more acceptable to be angry than to be hopeless or anxious. And so anger in itself is sometimes more accessible than those other emotions because usually the anger is covering up something very, very painful. And as humans, we want to avoid pain as much as possible. So it's only natural that sometimes we would avoid feeling that really uncomfortable underlying emotion. And we're going to deal with the anger on the surface level instead. And oftentimes, with anger being a secondary emotion, if you validate and deal with and feel that primary emotion, that under the iceberg emotion, then the anger will usually subside, right? So an example I have for this is politics. Oh, politics. I feel so angry when I think of politics and our government, specifically in America. It makes my blood boil. Like I feel so physically activated when I think of politics. And when I was writing for this episode, I was reflecting like, okay, what is under that anger? Because quite frankly, there's not a ton of things that make me super, super angry. I think because I'm more comfortable dealing with all of the emotions, right? So I'm not like my blood, it takes a lot to irk me, right? But nothing irks me like politics. And I was thinking about it. I was like, okay, what is under that anger? Like what is the primary emotion under that anger? And it's hard to even talk about it. It's hard to even think about is this humongous fear. So with our current political environment in the United States, I don't know what the future is going to look like at all. I don't know if I'm going to have reproductive rights. I don't know if I'm going to have the right to marry whoever I want. I don't know if the people I love and care about are going to be, if their rights are going to be maintained. I fear even outside of my direct experience and all of the people in my life and how their lives are going to look at a grander scale, I am so fearful of the state of the world and our earth and our climate. And that fear is so uncomfortable. And like, it literally feels like someone is gripping my throat, being like, do not feel that, do not address it. And so for me, it is so much easier to be angry and to say, fuck these people, screw this, screw politics, screw the whole government, just throw it all out. It's so much easier for me to be angry than it is to address that like very real, and I want to say like life-threatening fear, because that's really what the stakes of it are. I find myself being like, oh, don't be dramatic, like it's not that big of a deal. But no, it's literally like the future of our lives. And so that is so scary to me that it is so much easier to just be angry. So yes, I agree that sometimes you can just be angry, but sometimes there's something else going on underneath that anger, and the anger is a more accessible emotion that we can feel. And so when you're angry, I want you to explore, I want you to ask yourself, what is underneath this anger? What really needs tending to and comforting? And that can help manage the severity of your anger. So why do you care to learn about anger? What are you going to get out of this episode? Well, first and foremost, I just want to say my intention with this episode is I want you guys to learn how to hold your anger, how to hold that fire without letting it burn you. I want you guys to, instead of being scared and burned by your anger, I want you to use it as a catalyst for change and for action, and really discover the power that comes from rage and feeling angry. Our emotions give us so much information to our lives, and I want you guys to learn how to not only manage your anger, because it can be so uncomfortable and distressing in our bodies, but not only just manage it, I want you guys to use it to your own advantage and to have it help you help yourself. So that's my intention for this episode. And while anger is a universal human experience, it is an emotion that we all feel. A lot of us are not taught how to manage our anger or how to express it in a safe way. And so I want to talk a little bit about how we're conditioned. I literally can't do an episode without talking about our societal conditioning because it's so relevant to our mental health and our experience. So stereotypically, men are conditioned to express anger. That is socially acceptable as a man. You can be angry. It's also on the tail end of you can't be anything but angry. Anger is okay to express, but sadness, no. Anxiety, no. Guilt, fear, no. You can't express those, but you can be angry. And so a lot of times what we see is men who have suppressed all of their emotions, and so they feel this boiling level of anger because it's the only way that they can express their emotions, which is very, very harmful. Okay, and then on the other side of the coin, we have women or queer folk or BIPOC people who are often invalidated for their anger or taught it's not okay to be angry or labeled and judged when we do express anger. And so typically women will repress that anger and they will emote in other ways, but they're taught at a young age, like, it is not okay to be angry. You can't be that angry girl, right? But men are taught these behaviors are okay. You can punch a hole in the wall and you can slam the door and you can yell, but God forbid you cry, right? And I wore my little tough guys wear pink shirt for this episode because I'm like, anger is something that is so deeply tied to male conditioning. And so I just really wanted to like wear this to like, I don't know. Anyways, and so with women or marginalized folks, we're often taught that our anger is too much. It's too much to express, or we feel a lot of shame when we feel angry because we think, okay, I'm bad because I'm feeling really angry, or it's not okay to feel angry. And we repress that. And I want to say that there is harm done on both sides when we are conditioned this way when it comes to our anger. There is harm with men only being taught that it's okay to be angry. And there's harm with women and marginalized folks that we're not allowed to express our anger. Okay, both are harmful. And I just wanted to touch on that before this episode because the way that we are conditioned so deeply ties into our emotional experience. And especially with anger, it feels very much separated by the gender norms or the gender roles, I mean. So if you've ever felt guilty or upset about being mad, or if you've ever been afraid of your own reaction or response to something because of your anger, if you ever have felt disconnected from yourself after having a huge reaction, or you shut down because you're so angry, this episode is for you. Let me help you learn how to manage your anger. And again, I want you guys to learn how to hold the fire of your anger without letting it consume you. And I want you to alchemize it so you can transform that emotion into something positive. Okay, let's talk triggers. What are some triggers for anger? So a trigger is anything that causes an emotion to occur. So I broke down common triggers for anger into like categories and then examples of them. Okay, so a common category of triggers for anger is injustice. This is the one that gets me going. So an example of an injustice is like seeing something unfair, seeing people be treated differently, feeling like you've been wronged or mistreated. That can be a huge trigger for anger. Another category is lack of consideration. This one also gets me. So this is like being interrupted in conversation, having plans repeatedly canceled, being left out or ignored, or feeling a lack of support in the relationships in your lives. Those can all be huge triggers for anger. The next category is being criticized. So this is something that teenage Sydney absolutely hated. I was a menace. My teenage self was very, very angry. I repeatedly felt like criticized by my mom specifically. And so I was so angry all of the time. So being criticized can look like being micromanaged at work. This can look like nitpicking comments from your parents, like my experience, or maybe from a partner. This can also look like criticizing, can also look like someone yelling at you or falsely accusing you of something that you didn't do. That makes people super angry. More common triggers for anger is things like disrespect. I'm getting like angry as I'm talking about these things, but disrespect can be a huge trigger for anger. Feeling rejected. So any type of rejection can be a trigger for anger. So that could be like not getting a job that you interviewed for. That could be like being broken up with can make people really freaking angry. Being cheated on, right? It triggers that sense of rejection in you. And then the last category I have is feeling controlled. So this is a lack of freedom. Like when I was a teenager, my parents had my location, and that kind of made me mad because like I couldn't go and do whatever I wanted. Like they always knew where I was. And so that type of controlling triggered some anger in me. Things like jealousy. Like if you have a partner who is very jealous and doesn't let you wear certain things or go out with certain people, feeling like you're being controlled can make you really, really angry. And our life history, especially if there's been any trauma, can absolutely correlate to the things that trigger us. So something that might not be triggering for one person could be triggering for somebody else based on their own personal history and experience. And I talk about all of these triggers because if you know the things that irk you the most, that get under your skin, that get the biggest reaction out of you, that directly clues you into what do you value and what do you care about most. So like, for example, I get very, very upset if someone disrespects me or somebody else because I value respect almost more than anything else. And so knowing what escalates you and knowing what gets you really worked up is a direct correlation to how much you value that thing. So I get really worked up when we talk about politics because there's a ton of injustice going on, and I'm someone that really values justice and fairness. Now I want to explore, what does anger look like in your body? So I want to talk about this because sometimes different parts of our emotional experience clue us into what's happening in our lives, in our bodies. So some people are really conscious of their thoughts and they're like, oh my God, I'm angry because I had an angry thought. That's not really how my brain works. I have so many thoughts all of the time that, like, if I'm thinking really, like, if I'm in an emotion, I'm thinking about it, I'm not really aware of it. So I want to clue you guys into, how does anger feel in your body? So that way you can recognize it and have your body clue you into, okay, I'm feeling angry. Now I'm going to learn how to manage it. Now I'm going to do a coping skill. Now I'm going to take a break. Because a lot of times we're unaware when we're super, super, super emotional. When we are feeling very reactive, we're kind of unaware. So our body sensations can clue us into how we're feeling and how we can cope with those emotions. Okay, so everyone experiences anger differently, but these are some common signs and body clues for anger. So think clenched jaw, clenched fist, just really tense, tight muscles. Feeling really, really warm, a lot of heat, specifically in your face or in your chest. I know if I get angry or really upset, my face turns bright red, and it's honestly kind of embarrassing. So I literally keep a fan on me at work because if, like, there's an escalation happening and someone's like really mad and yelling and stuff, like my face gets bright red. So this could look like shallow breathing and rapid breathing. You're starting to hyperventilate a little bit. Maybe your chest feels kind of tight and warm. Also with anger, things like restlessness, huge cue. Feeling like you have this like explosive energy in you. Anger is an emotion that I feel like it really like physically makes you want to act on something, right? When you think of like being super angry, you think of, oh my gosh, I want to punch this person. I want to punch a hole in the wall. I want to like do something with this anger. And having this somatic awareness, having this body awareness is really a key to healing because it can cue us into how we feel before our brains can, before our thoughts can cue us in. So now I want to talk about the costs of anger and what happens if you let it consume you. What happens if you don't manage it? If you let it boil over, what happens? So when anger is unacknowledged, it can become chronic. This can look like chronic resentment, bitterness, disconnection, really just like a sour attitude is what I think of. Like if you have chronic anger built up in your system, like you're not a person that people want to be around. Also, when anger has been repressed over and over and over again, something will happen to where you're going to boil. The lid is going to burst and the anger of everything you've ever been mad about is going to come out, right? So I think of like when I was a teenager, I had a lot of angst because I was very upset and I didn't know how to manage my emotions. And a lot of times I was just like, nope, we're ignoring it. We're ignoring it. I loved to repress my emotions and pretend like I didn't have them. And then what would happen is I would come home from a stressful day of school. I would be hungry because I had a very bad relationship with my body and restricted eating and things like that. And then my mom would literally say anything to me, like literally anything. Maybe she would critique me. Maybe she would tell me to put my clothes away. Maybe she would tell me to pick up my shoes. Whatever it was, that set me off. And then I'm screaming at my mom in the kitchen over one chore that she asked me to do. But it's not just the one chore. It's the months, weeks, years of resentment and shoving that anger to the side that had been built up. So then, hey, can you pick up your shoes? It's like, no, I can't pick up. You know, it's like just this rage that doesn't match the situation because it's been repressed. And I want to say that if you repress any emotion, this experience is likely going to happen. It might take a long time, but you're going to reach a point when your body can no longer contain the emotion. It needs to come out. It needs to be expressed. That is the nature of emotions. They demand to be felt. And if you don't feel them, eventually you're going to have a huge reaction. You're going to do something incredibly unhelpful and likely harmful towards other people if you are not coping with your anger as it happens. Same for any emotion. Being consumed by anger can damage relationships. Like I think of my relationship with my mom when I was a teenager. It was awful, right? We're going to be short with people. We're going to lash out. We're going to just not be fun to be around. So our relationships are definitely going to suffer. Our physical health suffers. You're going to feel way more stress. Think about all that tension when you feel angry in your body chronically over time. That is chronic stress. It can lead to cardiac issues. And again, it just does not feel good in your body, right? And it can also lead to a slew of mental health effects. This could look like depression, anxiety, addiction, anything to cope with your emotions, right? Also, if you're pushing your anger to the side and not dealing with it, then that can lead to acting passive aggressive. And passive aggressive, let me think of an example. When I think of like passive aggression, I think of Let's use an example of there's a married couple, one of them is repressing their anger. So when I think of passive aggression, I think of like little tiny comments that don't say what you're actually feeling, and they're just they're passively aggressive. So it's like, oh, I guess somebody's got to take the trash out. It's just like you're not expressing how you actually feel. And if you've been around people that are passive aggressive, you know how like annoying it is. I cannot stand it. I'm like, listen, if you're upset with me, just be real with me. Like, just talk to me about it, right? I would so much rather have someone just be plain aggressive than passive aggressive. It irks me. But anyways, if you repress your anger, you're likely to be way more passive aggressive, because your anger is trying to get out however it can, right? And our anger also makes us do these things called emotional behaviors. So this is any behavior that your emotion makes you want to do. So when I think of emotional behaviors for anger, I think of yelling, slamming doors. This could look like blocking people on social media, or just completely withdrawing and refusing to talk, isolating, just detaching yourself from the situation. Anger can also make you want to end a relationship because you're so angry. And that might not be the most mindful thing to do, or maybe the most aligned thing, but because you're so angry that you just straight up end relationships. Or you could even end relationships because of your behavior. So because you're so angry and you keep punching holes in the wall, people are going to leave you, right? Emotional behaviors can be like aggression. This could look like physical aggression. Maybe you fight people when you're angry, or maybe you're verbally aggressive. Like you just lash out and you're super mean to people. Also, another emotional behavior, at least that I do, it's like I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, but like subtweeting, or like posting something indirectly saying how you feel about somebody else. Like, I remember when I was a teenager, I used to subtweet all the time. Any minor inconvenience, I would subtweet. And I think it's just funny because like the subtweeting that I did like could get me in a lot of trouble. And like I would post on like my Finsta at the time, and it was just like things that weren't thought out, and inevitably it ended up biting me in the ass because of it. So that is one of my emotional behaviors. So I don't really use Twitter anymore, but when I still did, I would like subtweet and save to drafts. So I'm still like getting out the urge to like stir the pot and cause drama, but I'm not actually doing anything with it. And then later I would go back and look through my drafts and be like, oh my God, Sydney, you're trying to be so problematic. Like, ugh. So I wanted to talk about the things that happen when we repress our anger, or when we don't learn how to manage it, because these emotional behaviors can be really, really harmful. And if you're listening to a podcast called You Are the Healer, you're likely interested in healing and becoming better and growing. And these behaviors like punching walls and yelling and ending relationships, those are not our highest selves. Those are not our most aligned selves. Those are not our most aligned and healed self. So how can we cope with anger? How can we learn how to manage this? And not just manage it, but learn how to take advantage of it. I like that those words kind of like, they don't like manage and advantage. Maybe they rhyme. I like it. That just kind of happened. Okay, so how are you going to cope with anger in a healthy way? Okay, the first thing to do is to name it and to be aware that you are in that emotional experience, which honestly I feel like is the hardest part. A big way that I clue myself into my emotional experiences is I check in with my body, because my body is very loud when I'm feeling emotions. If I'm angry, if you're watching this on video, I just like clenched up my face and my fist. I'm like, "Urgh." You just feel so tense, you know? So acknowledging that you're in anger is the first step, because how are you going to cope with an emotion if you don't even know what emotion you're feeling? That's why it's so important to be tapped into our bodies. So you're going to name the anger without shame. You're not going to judge yourself. You're not going to criticize yourself for feeling anger. You're just going to say, I'm feeling angry right now. Huh, I'm feeling angry. And that's it. You're going to name it. You're going to acknowledge what you're feeling, and you're going to name it. I'm feeling angry right now. Okay? The next steps I have, you can do in any order, whatever feels right for you. Again, you are the healer. You know yourself better than anybody else ever could. So take what resonates, forget about the rest. A big thing with anger, because it's an emotion that makes us feel so restless and like all that energy, pent up energy, a great thing to do for anger is to move your body. Whatever form of exercise you like, it doesn't even have to be exercise. It could just be like shaking out your body, getting that anger out and expressing it. So this could look like going on a walk. I've discovered this new thing lately called rage dancing. It sounds so silly, but basically what it is, you listen to like rage music, like angsty music, and then you just like dance and like let yourself flail and like shake it all out somatically. That's been really helpful for me. I love to dance, so that's been a great way for me to manage anger. I have a whole playlist called Rage. Rage! Okay. I'm sorry if you're listening in headphones if that was really loud. Please forgive me. Another thing you can do is you can scream, ideally into a pillow, unless you live in like a very soundproof area, or you let all the people in your house know, like, hey, I'm just gonna be screaming to get some things out. Don't worry about me. but there is something on like a very biological level that happens when you scream. It makes you feel so much better so fast. I had a patient the other day who's really upset because her parents basically dropped her off at the psych hospital, never called, never visited, and they did not answer any of her phone calls. So I'm like, yeah, girl, I'd be mad too. So she's like, I want to scream, but I don't want anyone to be alarmed. And so I was like, okay, what I want you to do, take your pillow, go into your bathroom. We'll close the bathroom door. We'll close the front door. So that way, like, people won't really hear you. And she's like, okay, bet. She goes in the bathroom and I very faintly hear her little scream. And she just did it once. And I was like, girl, you can keep going if you need to. And she was like, no, I already feel so much better just from that one scream. So don't underestimate the power of screaming into a pillow, getting it out. I've really found a lot of great healing work in vocalizing things and like humming and screaming. There is really something powerful there. So if that works for you, go ahead and try it. Also, let's say your anger makes you want to cause a fight and you're very physical. You could go to a boxing class. You could get on your boxing gloves and punch your mattress. You could like go to your gym and lift a bunch of weights and like get that energy out. Rage can be a great fuel for a workout. I'm just going to say that. The leg day I had after the election was unlike any leg day before. It was 2 hours. I had a lot of rage to work through. So after you move, the next thing that you can try is to express the rage, express the anger creatively. So this can look like just journaling and just venting about whatever you're upset about. Something that I like to do if I'm feeling particularly stressed about something is I will either record a video where I completely just unfiltered vent about something, or I'll record a voice memo in my phone and I'm like, I'm pissed and I'm just going to talk about it. And that way you express the anger. You give it the time it needs to share what it's learned with you, right? Emotions are so informative. And so when you express your anger, you're likely to learn what the anger is trying to tell you. And so if you write it out, if you speak it out, you could write poetry, you could paint. Any type of creative expression is going to help you understand your emotional experience and like, wow, why did I get so elevated about this thing? And you could even like write a letter and not send it. This is something that I found really, really helpful, is especially when it comes to like relationships with people, writing things to them and not sending them. So helpful. So helpful. So those are good ways to express your emotions. And likely when you express it, you don't have to consciously be aware of why it's happening or what's going on. Just using that emotion as the alchemist to create something can be really, really helpful in decreasing that emotional intensity that you're feeling. And then expressing it will allow you to collect the data from it. So we can use what we've learned from our emotional experience as information that can then guide us to set boundaries or have an assertive conversation or to communicate needs with other people. So once we acknowledge that we're in the feeling, we move our bodies, we cope however, I mean, there's a million other coping skills that we could talk about, but for anger, I feel like typically you got to move your body and then you can express it. And then you can use, once you're regulated, once your emotional intensity is at a more manageable level, then you can use that information to set boundaries, to be assertive, to speak up for yourself, to make sure your needs are being met. So anger can really, really, really be a tool to help us. So anger tells us that something's wrong and encourages us to act. So when we channel our anger, when we don't let ourselves get consumed by it, and when we instead, I think of like anger as like this fire, right? So if we're thinking of anger like a fire, you could let it consume you, you could let it burn you, it could get out of hand and actually destroy everything. Anger and the behaviors we have when we're angry can be so catastrophic. And if we learn how to manage our anger, right? If we're coping with it, we're feeling it as it comes up, then it can be a fire that lights a path. It can be a fire that motivates us, that inspires us, that can help lead the way for change and for action. So channeling our anger can fuel setting boundaries, social justice movements. A lot of times, social justice movements are fueled by anger and people who have had enough and they need to do something about it. Anger can fuel our creativity. It can fuel empowered communication and speaking up for our needs. And it can fuel personal transformation. Okay, so like we all have anger. No one is immune to it. And so it's about acknowledging this as this is part of my experience. Part of me is angry. Part of me is so pissed off and frustrated about things. And I can take that energy and I can take that intense emotion and I can channel it into something good. I can channel it into an action. I can channel it into changing my life. So our anger can tell us what we don't tolerate anymore. Our anger shows us what we deeply care about. Our anger can be motivation. Say, what do I want to do because of this? What can I change because of this situation? Anger can wake us up. It can clarify our values, and it can reconnect us with our power. Like, anger can illuminize us. It can light up our path. It can show us the way forward. It can create change and action. It's so cool when you learn to not be scared of your emotions. And when you learn that your emotions can actually be a catalyst for healing and creating a better life for yourself. That was good. I like that one, Sydney. Thank you. Anger is not a problem to fix. It is a power to understand and to alchemize into creating change and action. There is nothing wrong with being angry. Everybody feels anger. Just don't let it consume you. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. Today we talked about what anger is, why we have it, triggers for anger, what happens if we let our anger run the show and the things that anger makes us want to do, how to cope with it, and what can be done from our anger, what change can be made. So I appreciate you so much for listening. Please support me on my Instagram at youarethehealer. You can always DM me your thoughts on the episode. And please share this episode with someone you think really would benefit from it. So many of us feel angry. I know you guys have that one person in your life that you're like, oh, they need to learn how to manage their anger. Okay, how are they going to learn how to manage it if no one talks to them about it? Send this episode to them or share it on your story and post the link to it. It really means so much to me when you guys do that. You can follow me on Spotify and Apple and YouTube and subscribe and comment and engage in all of those things. And until next time, may you be well.